speaking of Sidriel, one day, the shouts of chaos reigned throughout the heavens. A day of defending the relic. A day where he knew this task, his duty, was to protect the relic of heaven. He hears his lover call out in need of aid. Something about the screams themselves, the horror, and the terror that arose from his voice, the shouting in his head from the connection with the other Celestials and his lover made his heart beat wildly. Something was clearly wrong. And when he ran to go find his lover, to save him, to help him, to find whatever was causing him to feel so much pain that left Sidriel himself burning, he left his post. He abandoned it, leaving the relic behind in order to save his lover. And when he finds him, he's met with the sight of them dying. Every piece of their celestial flesh burning to ash in front of him, blowing away with the wind. And stumbling forward, helplessly, he falls to his knees, wondering if his own hesitation, his own duty, was what caused his death. And the shadowy figure in front of him ignites into pure flame with laughter. And the ashes that remained of his lover swept up into nothing as the heavenly gates and everything around him ignited in flame. In the distance, the sounds of growling cheers, of horrible and ferocious screams. The victory cry echoed in Sidriel's ears. One by one, the connection with every celestial being he knew in his heavenly realms disappeared like the fireflies going out at night. The relic, his duty, was taken, the power being sucked from the heavens themselves. And the thoughts raced through his mind. Does he get up? Does he fight back? Does he try to stop them, chase them, go after the relic when everything stops? And suddenly, all the light vanishes, the flames surround him, and the world goes black. The thoughts turn into distant voices, and he hears the echoes of the screams bouncing inside of his head. And when he wakes, his vision is clouded. The sounds of crackling fires and flames, the heat and dryness of the air suffocating him back into reality. His clothes have been stripped. He lay naked on the barren brimstone, left only with the ring that could never be removed from his hand. His bonded weapon, the Dawnbringer, lay dormant inside of him. The abyssal shouts surround him as his shackled hands try to wipe the memories from his eyes. And every movement he makes tightens the binds around him, and as he looks down, his naked body is bruised, cut, bleeding, and his wrists and ankles are discolored and aching. And suddenly the situation is taken in. A prisoner, captured, enslaved. The ache in his head was pounding, and the smell of iron engrossed his senses. He was bleeding heavily from his head, the blood dripping from his orifices. His ears echoing the sounds of the screams of his people, threatening to devour him. How long he'd been out? This fate, this punishment, this enslavement. He deserved this. He had left his world to die, abandoned his duty, watched as the flames consumed the very land he had called home since his birth. His family, his lover, the gates of heaven themselves, gone. And now, he would pay by the will of the gods. He would pay for his insolence, for his betrayal. This was his punishment. And he sat there, resolved, taking in everything, believing that all the choices he had made, well, he deserved them. Beaten nearly to death, blood drawn over and over again, tortured, dragged through the flames, burned, healed, and burned again, tossed into his cell over and over, in the 7th level of hell, with the 7 lords of purgatory, his captor, the lord of lust and excessive love, but for him, a virgin, a man of purity. He only saw that it had been his selfish want, his selfish need to save his lover was what exactly had gotten his people killed, and yet he had not met his captor, but his jailers, the demons and devils of the world, scarred, visceral, and hideous. The visitors who frequented his cell spoke often enough. It was only until one day, the day he truly thought was his last. The day he had chosen would be the day of his death. With the bruises left unhealed, the blood pooling around him, his eyes foggy, that was the moment his captor came to visit. That was the moment all of the pain and suffering and heaven-shattering realizations came crashing down. It was then he realized it had been his lover all along. The man he had tried to save. The man he had loved. The man he had gave up his world for. The Lord of Hell. The devil of lust. His torturer. His punisher. His executioner. The worst of the trickery came from the corruption that seeped into him during his stay in the hells. He lost faith in himself completely and saw himself as what he truly was. The Endbringer. The destroyer of all things. Not the brightening of the dawn. Not the bright sun that peeked over the gates of heaven, but the darkness and ash that bled through him. The thought of using his own abilities was punishment in itself. A torture he couldn't bear. A torture he could not bring himself, and he could not bring forth the light he once knew. And when he tried, he was twisted into fire. Flames erupting from his hands. No longer light, pure, but the flames of hell. The experiments of the devils, the hell he lived in, corrupted his very essential essence, bathing him in the flames of purgatory, the fires of the Lord of Lust. He was a man of fire, burning from the inside. But unbeknownst to him, it had been his ability all along, developed, learned, and grown. But being the Dawnbringer was to bring the fires of the sun, and yet he never knew. Instead, he sat there, his thoughts on his failures, the corruption of the hellfire, and the lost power of his light. And so we come to the story of the day when a spoon of starlight, a day where he sat empty in his cell, bleeding and broken, that the spoon of starlight seemed to fall with the weight of the sun itself, landing in front of him, his hands no longer chained, for he had no strength left to fight. But there, the spoon fell, in front of his very eyes. A reminder that light comes from many sources. A reminder that fire is not evil, because how can something evil bring forth light itself? And so that spoon, the glimmering spoon of starlight, was hope. A small hope in a burning, tragic world. And a man, days, months, years later, a man came, broke open his cell, and carried him off to the central plains, to the Middle Earth, to a land seemed to be haunted by the shadows that chased Sidriel himself. And this man seemed cursed as much as he was. But Sidriel had no fight, no passion, just emptiness. And so when the man with the long hair, the man with the messy room and the pale green eyes, came to him day in and day out, fed him breakfast, gave him shelter, it felt like just another prison. Because one minute the man was gently caressing the side of his face, and the next he was cold and distant like ice. Nothing seemed to make sense. So what was this new prison? What was this man's purpose? Who was he? And why did he have to keep him captive? But Sidriel did not fight back. He accepted his fate, another line in his, what he thought was deserved punishment. Day in and day out. From prison cell to prison cell, walking behind a man who was like snow on a cold winter's eve. Silent and beckoning. And there we leave the story of Sidriel to the current tales of Call to Shadow, where Sidriel lives in a house with none only but a man named Círdan, the once brother of Arendor, a wizard unlike any other, cold, dark, and unkind. At least, unkind sometimes.